So today's video, we put together this old KX, basically went through the whole motor, transmission, pile of welding in the cases, and got it running. Now going through the heat cycles, trying to break this motor in. Obviously I don't have a YouTube video for that engine build because I just started making YouTube videos, but it's bogging out. Carburetor, I have not even looked at the carburetor, I just threw it on there. So I'm going to go through the carburetor on this thing, take it all back to factory settings, and check it out. Go through it, clean it up. So here we go. Here's the bike. It's a 91 KX250. Had a pile of broken internal parts. Typical clutch cable boss broke off, so we welded that up. It was abused, very well loved, so kind of went over it. Now what's happening is last night I was riding it up and down the driveway, and the carburetor float bowls are sticking, so it's just dumping fuel out of all the overflows. So we're going to pull it off, pull it apart, and see what's going on. Pretty short work of that. There's not much to it. Basically just undo that boot, and the back band is missing. Something on my list to replace. Undo fuel line. It's missing all of the vent hoses. It's on my list to replace as well. So anyway, straightforward. Just leave the main slide hanging here attached to the cable. I'll show you how to pull that off later. And that's your main jet right there. We'll pop that off and we'll have a look at the set point of that needle. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to pull our fuel air screw out. We're going to pull our choke out. We're going to inspect that. We're going to pop the bowl off, and we're going to have a look at all the jets. If you look back at the previous video I did on the Grizzly, diagnosing that no start condition, I briefly went through that carb real quick. This is going to be a lot of repeating, looking at the pilot jet, and we'll show you that when we get to it. So for now, to start, we're going to pull this bowl off and see what we can find. So 3mm Allen. So here we go. This is our overflow tube here. So when I was riding it around, obviously what was happening was if this was oriented this way, you have these floats which float up and down, and they actually activate this little valve in here, and that turns the fuel flow on and off. So either that wasn't working, or possibly these get cracks in them and can fill full of fuel and won't float as nice. Let's pop them off and have a look, and we'll have a look at the valve as well. So pop that off, you just slide this pin out and those come off. That pin just slides out, all that lifts out. So there's our floats. There's the valve. Little rubber tip on it. Still feels nice and soft, it's pliable, it's not covered in crud. Down inside there, it looks okay. So we have our pilot jet, our main jet, and then our choke circuit. So we'll pop those all out and have a look at them. Pilot, 6mm wrench for this. I go grab one. So 148 is the jet size in there right now. I'd have to look at the manual to see what stock is. If you look at the jet itself, it'll have a number stamped in it. See that there? Anyway, there's a little O-ring in there. Pop the choke out. So what you're looking for on this choke, again, you're looking for any crud or corruption. You're gonna look at the sealing, that sealing face there, make sure it's still soft and pliable. And what that seals on in there, you'll see there's a little boss at the bottom of that hole there. That's what that seals on. So our pilot, our air fuel screw was screwed all the way in. So that could have that could be a problem with why this bike was not running the greatest. We'll look in the manual to see what its factory position is. There's a little spring in there. Typically 1.5 to 2.5 turns for the most part is what on average I've seen. So we'll just blow all of these holes out now. Make sure everything's clean. Give them a little shot of carb cleaner. And run air through every which way. Same with the jets. Paying attention, like I mentioned in the last video, paying attention to all these little holes. Make sure they're all clear. can of carb cleaner. Give everything a little bit of a spray. This carb doesn't look too bad. One thing I recommend is that you always wear gloves. These chemicals are not good for you. Obviously, I'm do as I say, not as I do. Like I always tell the kids, safety first. Grab my airline, give this a little bit of a blowout. Okay, so this is all cleaned up now. Looks pretty good. So we just reversed the order for assembly. None of this stuff has to be super tight. One thing I found when I was building this bike was that everything was over torqued. The torque specs on a lot of this stuff is very loose, so you don't need to over torque everything. So I'm just looking at the seat of that valve to make sure that where that little rubber part sits, there's no nicks or any weirdness going on with it. And that's where that little valve sits in here. And that's what controls your fuel on and off. So that opens up when the float bowls come down. That pulls that down, allows fuel to flow in through the fuel supply. As the fuel level comes up, these floats here float up and close off this valve. That little rubber part will seat, and theoretically it stops the flow of fuel. If that doesn't happen, then you want to look real close at that. Another little trick is sometimes you can bend this just a little bit. This little metal tab is where this float will kind of ride on. There's a little wire and a string. I'm trying to show you there a little bit there. I'm not sure if you can see that. But if you change the angle of that, you can increase the amount of pressure that the floats will put on that valve. You don't want to go too crazy with it, because if you go too much, then you won't allow enough fuel in there for the circuits to work. So we're just gonna give that a little bit of a bend. There's a little wire on this thing that hangs over that. Slide all that business in there. Little axle back in. So there's the works. So obviously this is upside down. So right now those floats are calling for fuel to flow in through here, through that valve. Float bowl will fill up, and then once it's full at that point, that should be isolating that valve. Check the gasket, make sure the gasket is good shape still. When you buy a carb kit, it'll come with a new gasket. And then you you can see that the way that this bowl is made, the shape of the bowl is what retains that little float axle in there. Pull it out. Again, no need to over tighten these. Remember the Grizzly, it had these were all stripped and replaced with some other screws somebody had laying around. Torque spec on these is probably 7 or 8 inch-pounds at the most. This stuff all looked really good. But having that air fuel screwed all the way in was probably what causing our bogging issues here. We'll look in the manual and we'll see what the actual stock spec is, and then we're going to also have a look. I'm going to show you on the main jet how you change the jetting, or you change the pin set point to lean it out or richen it up. So you don't want to over tighten this. I'm going to go screw it all the way in, nice and gently. So there, seated all the way. Back it out. 1.5 turns to start. But I'm actually going to go look in the manual and see what the manual calls for. Be right back. Alright, so the manual calls for 1.5 turns out. That's where we are now. The stock main jet's a 168, the stock pilot jet is a 60, which I didn't show you the 60, but that's what was in there. It's a stock pilot jet. Alright, let's go over the bike. We'll pull that jet off, show you pop that off, and then where to look at the set point. Try and set this up in a way that you can see everything. So if you just pull that spring all the way back, the throttle cable just sits into a little groove in there. You just wiggle it around and it'll come out. So see the ball there? That sits in there where that little slot is. And then when you let go of all this, the spring and all this crap will fall off. Alright, let's just hang in there. So we're gonna pop that main needle out, undo that, again 6mm, pop that nut off, main needle will come out, and then we can see where the clip is. That sets our how lean the bike's gonna run. So you can see there, that's where the cable will go in, and then it just kind of hooks in there. So this bike's running a little rich. I believe the second from the top is stock, and this bike here has the clip set in the third. So because we put a stock top end back in this bike, we're going to go back to the stock point and see how that works for us. So it's just a little C-clip or circlip. Pop that off. And you want to look at the needle and make sure that it's in good shape. Slide all that back in. Reverse the sequence. Alright. Let's go back to the bike and throw this carburetor in and see what effect that has. So this is a little bit tricky sometimes to get all this. I found that sometimes you can get it without disconnecting the throttle, but I have had to just pull a cable out of the throttle end just to make life a little easier. But this looks like, there we go. Let me just release all that. There you have it. Make sure everything's working good. Make sure both boots are seated on the carburetor. Alright, let's lower this down and see how it goes. It's not leaking fuel anymore, but still seems to be bogging a bit. I'm going to let it warm up, run it up and down the driveway a little bit, and see if I can get that clear. Might have to go back to the drawing board on the jetting a bit. See what happens. Alright, so I just got back from ripping up and down the driveway, up and down the road a couple times. Seems to be running way better. Rev is good. It's not leaking fuel anymore. So I haven't made any other adjustments than what I did in the video. So it seems to cleared itself out. Could have been some shit on the plug or something stupid. but seems to be running great now. The next problem that we have now with this bike is that our clutch is slipping. Not good. One thing I didn't do when I put it back together is I just assumed it was fine and I slammed it all back together. Stupid me. Didn't think to measure the plates, measure the friction plates. So I'm gonna pull this apart in the next video and we're gonna go through the clutch, what to look for in that. So that's it for this video. Everything seems good with the carburetor. Hopefully you got some tips or tricks out of it. I don't know. Whatever. It's another video. In the next one. Peace.